What's up, everybody? Morgan here. It's been a hot minute since I've done a video. Guide season has been like insanely busy, and today I wanted to go over something that me and my guide buddies do day in, day out, and it's like insanely effective. So today's video, we're gonna go over drop shot nymphing. You may have heard it referred to as that. Drop shot nymphing, bounce rig fishing. When you're nymphing, standard nymphing knowledge tells you to put a strike indicator, I call it a bobber, so throughout the video I'm going to call it a bobber, up high on your leader. Put that up high. Go ahead and run a big long chunk of leader, put a fly, put some weights up above that fly, and then put a second fly below it. That is actually a way ineffective way to fish nymphs when you're fly fishing for trout. There's a lot of reasons that rig doesn't work. So I'm going to show you, I mean, it does work, it does. Like, you can catch fish doing that. But there's a more effective way to go about it. So I'm going to show you how I rig this rig, and then how I fish it and some of the nuances on this rig. We're going to go over some conceptual stuff first, then we'll go over how I rig it and fish it, okay? So we're going to act like we do that standard rig for nymph fishing that you see in fly fishing, where you've got the bobber up here, you've got a leader line going down, you've got weights down here, then you got some flies up here, one fly here, and then off the bend of the hook, the other of the one nymph, you got another nymph hanging up there. That will get your flies down, but there's a few reasons that is very ineffective. First and foremost is strike detection. So you need to really start picturing how your rig is traveling down the river. That rig, the bobber is going to be downstream. We're going to act like in this video the river is running from my left to my right, so the right is downstream. Okay, your bobber is going to be down here. Okay, it's going to go down to a leader line. You're going to hit your weights, and then your flies are going to be somewhere up here. Okay, well, strike detection is an issue with that rig, and the reason being is your flies are in the fish's strike zone. That fish has to grab those flies, lift those weights up, and then get tight to that bobber and pull it down for you to detect a strike. So right there, you're already insanely inefficient, right? I mean, that fish has to really grab that fly for you to notice a strike. Or you could be fishing in fast water where it's gonna get tight super fast anyways. The other thing with that rig is most guys aren't fishing enough weight. They're kind of tumbling along way up high, like most people do, like 12 inches above those weights. And those flies, you don't really know where they're at. So your weights are like right here, and your flies are somewhere up here, and it's just like I said, most guys don't do enough weight. So it's like kind of like you really don't know where it's at. It's kind of up in the mid water column, things like that. So it doesn't really get your flies down. And then when it comes to detecting a strike, like the fish has to absolutely clobber it for you to see it. This rig was designed to get your flies down, keep them down, hold them there throughout the whole drift. The second a fish touches it, your bobber's gonna go down. Okay, that's what's gonna happen. The idea behind this rig is that it's very similar to Euro nymphing. Okay, it's like Euro nymphing at a distance almost. That's how I describe it. It's not exactly the same, and there's people that are probably gonna eat me alive for saying that because it's not the same. But that's kind of what we're doing here. There's certain water types that it's better in than others. Pocket water situations, not super great, but if you're like fishing big, long runs and pools, fishing out of a boat, this is a really efficient rig, and it should totally like crush fish for you. So the idea behind this rig is we're gonna have our bobber up high, okay? We're gonna have our weights on the very bottom of the rig. The weights are going to be below the flies. We're not going to tie them up above the flies. We're not going to like stick them on the leader up there above like a blood knot or a surgeon's knot. Like, we're going to have them on the very bottom. Okay, what that's going to do is as this rig goes down, we're going to cast it out there. Your bobber's going to hit the water. Your weights and flies are going to land up there, and it's going to be ticking. That's why out here in Utah we call it a bounce rig, because your bobber's going to be bouncing. It's going to be going tick, 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 tick down the river, okay? I'm gonna just kind of go into how I rig this, and then we'll go into some of the nuances of fishing it, okay? So here I've got my fly line, okay? To rig this rig, you're just gonna take a leader, and it doesn't matter what size it is. It can be a 9-foot 6X, it can be like a 12-foot 4X, I don't really give like, it's gonna be like, it doesn't matter. You're gonna cut off all of the leader, which is totally sacrilege, okay? You're gonna cut off all the leader and just leave a tiny butt section of about 1.5 feet, 2 feet, something like that, okay? That's all I'm gonna do. I'll explain why here in a second. To that leader, I am going to put a tiny little tippet ring, just like that. Like Rio tippet ring, okay? So we're gonna put that, we're gonna basically take that big long chunk of leader and we're gonna cut off, get a little bit butt section of it, and then just put a tippet ring on it, okay? And this is where I really draw from Euro nymphing. The reason we're gonna do that is I want this rig to be insanely efficient. I want it to get my flies down. I'm going to, from that tippet ring, add only tippet. I'm not gonna add anything else. I don't want a tapered leader, I just want straight tippet. The reason we're doing that is the surface currents on the river are faster than the currents on the bottom. And as you go move down the river column, right? So here's upstream, here's downstream. As we move up high in the water column to the lower part, the river currents start getting slower and slower, okay? If I use just a straight tapered leader, I get a thick butt section that tapers down very slowly. And what starts to happen in that water column is that thicker line doesn't cut through the water as efficiently. So it starts to kind of do this. It kind of bows down through the water column. That thicker line is buoying up your little nymphs, okay? We're gonna eliminate that by just going straight thin tippet. That's all we're gonna do, straight thin tippet, because that thin tippet has a very small surface diameter and it just cuts through the water and gets down, okay? Whereas if I left this tapered, it would do that bowing motion through the water column, which we don't want. We just want it to get down, okay? So nymphing is all about getting down to the fish's level. We've got that 1.5, 2 feet, and you'll see I just attached a strike indicator or bobber to it. Now when you do this rig, you don't want to do it with yarn, you don't want to do it with anything else. You just like get a thingamabobber, or the airlocks. You want basically a bobber, okay? So I've got that tippet ring attached to that. Then whatever size tippet I'm fishing to my flies is what I'm gonna put on after that, attached to that tippet ring. Okay, so in this case, we're fishing like size 18s. We got some bigger fish in this river, so I'm gonna go to 5.5X, okay? So here I'm gonna pull off some 5.5X. And the first thing I'm gonna do is take about 6 feet, which for me is about an arm's length and some change. Now, I am going to, with a clinch knot, and that's how I attach that butt section to that leader, I'm gonna just attach this tiny tippet section to that tippet ring with the same knot. Just a very small clinch knot. And that's why the tippet ring is there. That butt section of that leader is insanely heavy, right? It's something like 80-pound test. Okay, if I tried to attach 5X to that with a knot, it's not gonna hold. So you can see, and this one's a little banged up because it's been used a bunch, but you can see I just have a clinch knot with that thick line, and then a clinch knot with that tiny 5X tippet, 5.5X. And then I have, like I said, about 6 feet. To that chunk, I'm gonna go ahead and pull another chunk of 5.5X of about 15 inches off. Okay, so I've got a small chunk of 5.5X. You might not be able to see it. It's a little too long. Still is. Maybe it's more like 12 inches. I don't know. So then all I'm gonna do is attach that to that section of tippet that I had added earlier with the surgeon's knot. Now, I'm gonna leave the bottom tag end of that surgeon's knot long. because I'm gonna leave a fly attached to that. So we're gonna add a dropper tag with this small chunk of 15 inches of tippet. So you'll see here, I've doubled those lines over, and this is my small piece over here to the left. This is my long piece to the right. I'm gonna go ahead, pull those together, and I'm simply gonna do a triple surgeon's knot. Okay, so I got that surgeon's knot, and then I'm gonna pull it tight by pulling on the upper end of that knot. That way you'll see I get a tiny tag end on the top and a longer tag end on the bottom. I want that longer tag end because that's where I'm going to attach flies. So that top one, I just trimmed super short. So now I have a tiny tag that I can go ahead and attach the fly to. Now, all I'm going to do to finish this rig off is simply repeat that process. I'm going to take another, 12 inches of 5.5X and do the same thing to that chunk that I just added. So now I have a second little dropper tag. So I can now fish 2 flies. Now all I'm gonna do is attach my nymphs to those tags. This is one of the big advantages of this rig compared to Euro nymphing. We're gonna utilize weights to get our flies down, as opposed to weight built into the fly. That's one of the disadvantages with Euro nymphing. You have to have lead built up into it, you gotta have a tungsten bead, and sometimes that's not very efficient. Like sometimes you have really educated trout and you really need to have very precise flies. So here, I can use tiny little nymphs. For example, here's a size 20. This is a Mayhem, little PMD imitation. And I can fish that and get that super light, small fly down in the bottom of the water. Because I'm gonna utilize split shot to do that. Now I'm gonna take another small PMD nymph. So I'm putting that on my bottom tag end. You'll see how I built those 2 tag ends. And if it didn't make sense, it'll make sense here in a second. Basically, I have a terminal tag. Okay, the terminal end, the very bottom of it cuts off into nothing down here on the left. Okay, that goes to nothing. Right here, up above it, I have 1 fly. And then up above it, I have another fly. And then I have that 6 feet all the way to that tippet ring and my bobber up there. The last part of rigging this is putting the weights on, okay? And we'll go into how much weight you need to put on later. But all we're gonna do is we're gonna take that terminal tag, that very bottom chunk, and about 8 inches below that bottom fly, that bottom tag dropper, we're gonna simply do a triple overhand knot, okay? And we're doing this because we're gonna put weights on the bottom end of this rig, and we simply just need a stopper there to keep the weights from sliding off. Now, I'm gonna take some split shot, and I'm gonna go ahead and just attach it. Now, this run we're fishing is pretty fast and deep, so I'm gonna use a lot. And we'll go over how I know how much to use in a second, like I said. So when you're fishing this rig, your bobber, much like an inline rig, is gonna be downstream of the weights, and it's just gonna be going, your bobber's gonna be going tick, 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 tick. The advantage of this is 1, it gets our flies down. 2, our flies are between the weights and the bobber. That is absolutely vital for strike detection, because the second anything interrupts that relationship between those 2 things, those 2 things are tight. Our bobber and our weights are gonna be tight. Our flies are in the middle. The second anything touches that, it's already tight, you're gonna know about it. That bobber is gonna shoot underwater. So your strike detection goes through the roof, because a fish no longer has to lift up those weights and pull the leader tight in order for you to detect a strike, okay? So this is just built purely for efficiency. Get the flies down with the weight, get the flies down with the super thin leader, keep them there. They're gonna be there the whole time, and the second a fish touches it, we're gonna know about it. So now we're gonna go out on the river. I'm gonna show you how to fish it, show you some of the casting stuff. We'll go over how to know the right amount of weight, how to set the hook, and we'll get after it. Now we're in the river. We got our rig set up. Our bobber's up there, we got our 2 flies down here, and then we got our weights at the very bottom. Okay, the first thing we're gonna go over is water selection for this rig. This rig excels in big open pools, things like that. It does not excel in pocket water, super short drift situations. You'll notice I'm in a big long run right now. Right, so that's kind of the type of water you're looking for. Now the cast is a little unique on this rig. We're not going to be doing the like standard overhead cast that you see in like, you know, or runs through it, all that stuff, the stuff we like to do there. First and foremost, I'm not going to do that because you can see I'm surrounded by trees right here. But the other reason is if you start to try to overhead cast it and you're a fairly inexperienced caster and even a mid-level caster, you're going to get massive tangles with this rig. This rig is all about getting tight to the weights. If you try to overhead cast it, you really just want to get a nice big open loop. So if you're more experienced and you can control your loop size, big open loops, and you can totally overhead cast it. I overhead cast it, but again, really big open loops. You don't want to get like super tight laser beams. That's bad with this rig because you got a lot going on down there, right? You got a bobber, 2 flies on tags, and weights. So the basics of this cast, you're gonna let it get downstream. You're gonna let the river swing it tight, just like it is right now, okay? At the very end of it, so it's tight, I'm gonna reach my arm straight back and up. It's just a water load. You'll notice that leader is high in the water column. Then I'm gonna turn my wrist upstream quartering, okay, just like that. The last step, it's just like hammering a nail. That's all we're gonna do. Boom, goes right where I want it to. Super simple, super effective rig. You don't have to like be a crazy good caster. Super easy, okay? You're gonna know that it's time to recast because the river, if you're walking wade fishing, is gonna do step number 1 for you. Okay, the river's gonna grab that rig, swing it out tight. Those weights are now near the surface. I'm gonna lift straight back and up, turn my wrist, hammer the nail. That's all there is to it. If your cast ever doesn't go out when you're fishing this rig, it's because those weights are still on the very bottom of the river. So like right there, the river hasn't grabbed it. If I try and cast, it's not gonna go anywhere, right? We have to allow those weights to get near the surface, okay? So when we are wade fishing, that's usually caused by casting too soon. We have to let it swing all the way to the end of the drift, get tight, reach straight back and up. That leader is now high in the water. It's angling near the surface of the river. Now I know I can cast, just like that. Again, if I try and cast too soon, I'll basically show you what my clients mess up. So it's across from me right now. If I try and cast it now, it doesn't go anywhere because those weights are still on the bottom, okay? There's 2 ways to get tight to this rig, okay? Way number 1 is the way I've been discussing. You're gonna let that river grab it and swing it up tight. Then you're good to recast. Now, let's say it ends up too close to me, like right here, and it gets hung up in a rock. The river's not gonna grab it because my weights are on the very bottom. They're gonna get snagged, right? It's like right at my feet. The other way I can get tight to those weights, you can see it's snagged now. The river's now not gonna swing it tight. So all I'm gonna do is strip in the line and synthetically get tight to those weights. When I say synthetically, I mean I'm doing it. I am tight to those weights now, so you can get tight to them by stripping in the line. Then I can lift, turn, and cast, okay? So you have to be tight to the weights no matter what. That's more important when you're fishing from a boat as opposed to wade fishing, because when you're wade fishing, you'll let it just go ahead and swing tight. When you're in a boat, you wanna like just get a nice long drift with it, okay? So it's never really gonna swing tight when you're in a boat. So when you're in a boat, you're gonna have to strip in, get tight to it just like I'm doing right there. Those weights are high, I can turn and recast. So the main thing with casting this is just get tight to the weights. That is literally all there is to it. If the weights are not up high, the cast will not go anywhere. okay? So that's really all there is to the casting. It's a lot of variations of roll casts. That's really all it is, okay? Now all we're gonna go over is how to like kind of pick the weight out and get the weights and what the bobber is gonna be doing as you're fishing it. So you might have noticed earlier, this bobber is gonna do little bounces just like that. That bobber is doing little ticks and little knocks and all sorts of weird stuff, which if you're fishing inline, which is the rig I described earlier, that normally means set the hook because the fish touched it. But you have to remember, here, we're tight to those weights. Those weights are bouncing along the bottom. That's why out here in Utah, we call this a bounce rig, because that bobber is gonna be doing little tiny bounces. It's gonna be going tick, 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 tick. Little bounces of the bobber, we're not gonna do anything with. We're not gonna do anything until that bobber really goes under. Because again, that rig is tight, so the second a fish touches it, that bobber is gonna look like there's a fish attached to it. Like it's gonna shoot under and be bouncing like a bouncing basketball. It's gonna be like, it's gonna be going, hopefully you can see this. It's gonna be going tick, 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 dunk, 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 dunk. Like it's gonna do crazy stuff. Okay, the second that happens, we're gonna set the hook, okay? Now with this rig, if we set the hook by lifting straight up like you normally would, you're gonna lift that rig up and throw it into your face, throw it into your rod, throw it into the trees. You're just gonna cause a massive tangle. With this rig, when you set the hook, you wanna set downstream parallel to the river, okay? The reason we're doing that, and this is actually a great spot for me to show this, here we are, if we're facing down the river, like we're in a boat, we're on river left, okay? I'm a right-handed caster. So if I set the hook by pulling to the right and lifting up, here's the fish's mouth, here's my hook, I pulled it right out. We wanna pull it down into his mouth, okay? If we lift it up like a dry fly, we're gonna just cause a massive tangle. And you don't really have to pull that hard with this rig, okay? I kind of even tell people it's just a check. If I think I have a fish, I'm just gonna go, boop, just like that. You'll notice I didn't pull it so hard that I pulled it out of the drift. I just continue my drift, okay? Now, the difference between a fish and a rock, because you're gonna totally get snagged in rocks with this rig. If it's a rock, that bobber's gonna go down and it's gonna stay down. It's not gonna move around. It's just gonna kind of go and stop. In that case, pull downstream, pull to the left. The reason being is our bobber's here, our weights are here. It gets hung up in a rock and it just goes and stops, okay? Now, look, the fish just jumped right by. Oh no, that's a mink, cool. So anyways, I'm gonna pull it to the left to see if I can pop it over that rock that it's hung up on. If it's not, pulling to the right while you're standing in a stationary position won't do anything. You're standing here and you'll pull this way, pull this way, pull this way, but those weights are still way upstream of it. If it gets really snagged, you have to walk upstream, pull all the slack out and pull it out the same way it came in, okay? You have to actively go upstream to get it unsnagged, okay? So, let's see if we can catch a fish or a rock and I'll demonstrate what I mean right here. Made a cast. You'll see that little bounce is occurring. Getting my flies down. That's a fish. There you go. But you saw how immediately that bobber started jumping. I mean, it's very clear. That bobber started shooting upstream, okay? You'll notice I also immediately took my rod to the left and set the hook into the fish, okay? So that took me all of about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, not even. I mean, probably more actually because I was talking. But you'll see it's super efficient. The second that fish touched it, I knew it. It's kind of a smaller fish. Get the net out. I kind of hope he pops off. Can we not? Okay, trying to use side pressure. Boom, and he threw me into a tree. All right, well, I wanted him to pop off, but I didn't want him to do that. Whew. Believe it or not, I saved that rig out of that tree. Maybe this next one I'll actually try and land. Now, to select the right amount of weight, if you make a cast and your bobber for the first half the drift until it comes down to you isn't bouncing, you don't have enough weight. Okay, you want this thing, basically you're gonna make your cast, you want it bouncing the whole way through the drift. Now, so if you experience that, where you make a cast and you're not getting bounces right away, you know I don't have enough weight and I need to add some. Now, if you are constantly getting super hung up, where it's just like going to the bottom, getting snagged, take a little bit of weight off. You just want a nice even bounce throughout the entire drift. So it's all about just seeing that nice natural bounce, that nice natural drift. Okay. Oh, there's another one. Okay, so had a little weird bobber movement there, and boom, a fish. But you'll notice there, I was getting a bounce from the start all the way to the finish. Might actually try and land this fish because I want to go home because I've guided way too much and I don't like being on the river. That's what happens when you guide, kids. Okay, I'll let him run. But that was a super subtle eat. Like, for example, on an inline rig, I would have totally not even known that fish ate. I just saw that bobber acting a little weird. It wasn't doing its normal bounces, and I knew, boom, there was a fish there. Okay, oh, woo, woohoo. Good job, brown trout. The last one was a rainbow, this one's a brown. I'll actually try and land this one maybe. Okay, calm down. Calm down, bud. All right. Turn him to the right. Lift up, nice and tall. Get his head up. And, whoop, boom. There he is. Boom. That's all there is to it. There's a nice brown trout. Cool fish. Let him go. All right, so hopefully that showed you guys how to effectively fish a bounce rig or a drop shot rig. You know, the main thing is just go fish it, get comfortable with it. You saw how effective it was. I was honestly fishing for maybe 2 minutes and caught 2 fish when I wasn't like trying to provide commentary. And boom, it just flat out produces fish. So if you're like trying to catch fish out of a boat, like I said, big long runs like this, it's awesome for that. The second you start hitting pocket water, it's not as good of a rig. But for day in, day out nymph fishing on main tail waters, that's an insanely effective rig. And hopefully you learned why. Yeah, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram, do anything you can. I'm trying to retire from guiding. Not working so great for me. But yeah, subscriptions help. That's actually the main thing I need now, so just please click the subscribe button. It takes you 2 seconds. It helps me out a ton. And yeah, we'll hopefully get some more videos out and I can take more time off and help you guys out there. So have a good time out there. Go fish this rig. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comments. Thanks, guys.